RealAgriculture.com's coverage of the Western Canadian Dairy Seminar is brought to you by Alberta Milk.
I think this is when talking about lameness, especially in reproduction, it is the most, and if I could select the most important take-home message, it is to have a system, whatever system the farmer chooses to, is to identify, record, and analyze consistently, lameness, prevalence of lameness in the dairy farm. If you don't have that, I think it comes down to that basic, say that if you don't measure, you don't manage. So if you don't have a clear history of how lameness is in your dairy, and that can go to either a pretty good recording of the clinical cases through your hoof trimmer, it can be gait scoring on a consistent basis, and so on. So whatever you choose, it should help you define strategies on the long term. I think we're talking about, if you look at the literature, consistently you have. So first of all, we should also always be careful when we talk about especially health events individually and reproduction, because one leads to another, and it's always a little bit confusing sometimes. But to the best of what we could isolate is cows, for example, that has those gait scores of 3, which is the one that you mentioned, that are lame, but not necessarily to everyone. It can drop as much as 10 percentage units as far as first AI conception rates. You will have consistently 20 to 40 days open, days to conception, more days to conception. Twice as much the chances of not return to cycle at about 50 to 60 days. So those are some of the numbers which I thought it was important for them to know, just to have a relative idea of how much they're losing when you have pretty good prevalence of lame in your dairy. Yeah, gait scoring is more on the monitoring side. It's not going to solve your problem by looking and giving a certain number to them. But obviously, a good transition program, and by good transition program, all the way from managing on the time of calving, delivery of the calf, treatment of and monitoring and treatment of this, especially in this first 10 days postpartum. Where, in my experience, the farms that have a very aggressive program as far as taking temperature, checking for ketosis, checking for displacement of abomasum, those are the ones that do the best, job. Maybe if you have, and normally that's done in larger dairies, you may have a nutrition program for the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks that is a little bit more forage than the high producing, the regular diet. Everything to make that transition program as smooth as possible. And that will clearly affect not only lameness, but everything in terms of disorders. The other one, if I'm not mistaken, was gait scoring, the transition program. And obviously, and this is something that can be changed more on the medium to long term, which is design of stalls. One thing that from that part that strikes the most is the fact that cows that have deep sanded stalls they do really better. Lots of research talking about the behavior of these cows, time standing, time lying down, and you're trying to keep, there's this magic number of 12 hours of cows should be lying down per day. Obviously that should be on average for the dairy, should be analyzed with care, but that's what you kind of aim for. So if you have, if you're trying to monitor, and today we have technologies to easily have a pretty good idea of what's going on in your dairy, and that could be things that would help a lot. Well, the thing is, the relaxing part, and this is actually interestingly enough, it was a new information even to me, and that I got to know actually last year, is that that relaxing, this hormone that is released, by the time of calving, it relaxes not only pelvic ligaments and so on, it relaxes everything, and including the tissue that makes up the claw with the phalanx. And those are things that if you don't take care, or if you're not careful with this transition cow, and she starts having problems or the metabolic problems, it will affect the roof. So that's the hoof. So that's the part where they say, sometimes people tend not to believe it is a transition cow problem, but in fact it is. But this is one thing. Maybe we shouldn't put too much of emphasis on that, but it is a point, yes. Yeah, I think this is perhaps that's the second or third most important take-home message, is that it's easy for me here to come and say, oh, this is what happens in the ovary when you have lameness, this has happened with pregnancy loss, conception rates, days open, and so on. So that's the best we can do to give you numbers. As you mentioned before, it's important for them to have it. But it's really difficult on a practical and on an operational way to say, oh, I'm going to tackle just this. Because in general, even for reproduction today, it might be very likely that the best way to improve reproduction is to improve health, and not necessarily, obviously, with all the other technologies that is around, for estrus detection and for artificial insemination and so on. Those are pivotal. You have to have those. But I would say health should be one of the first, if not the first, concern today.